Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 7 of the best fish that you can keep in a 5-gallon aquarium. So here in Australia, we use litres instead of gallons. So I'm going to be referring to it as a 20-litre aquarium, just because that's the closest you can get to gallons in America. 5 gallons is technically like 18.97 litres here in Australia, although I'm just going to round it up to 20 litres for today's video. But yeah, I've picked out a list of 7 really cool fish, so without any further ado, let's jump into today's video. So the first fish on our list today is a super unique looking fish. We have celestial pearl Danios. So celestial pearl Danios, or otherwise known as galaxy Rasboras, are a super common and really unique nano fish. They are a little bit harder to get here in Australia, but if you can get your hands on them, I would definitely recommend them. I have yet to find any that I would like to buy, but I'm definitely looking out for some to try and breed in a future video. But yeah, the reason I put them in this list for today is because you could probably keep a good 3 to 4 in a 5-gallon aquarium without them starting to nip at each other. Probably could fit 4 or 5, although you may find that there might be some aggressive behavior just because they're in a pretty large group in a smaller sized aquarium, which makes it a little bit difficult for them if they are getting picked on to hide. Although, because they are quite a peaceful fish, that is quite uncommon to occur. So, from my knowledge, they are quite a hardy fish and they require quite a simple diet. So, obviously, I would probably recommend some live foods or frozen foods. So, stuff like baby brine shrimp, live blackworms, or even frozen brine shrimp or frozen blackworms would probably be the best food source for these guys. Although, I'm sure if you had a nice insectivore, dry diet you could give them, they would probably thrive off that as well. But yeah, the celestial pearl Danio definitely is one of my favorite nano fish. It looks amazing in a planted aquarium and it can actually cohabitate with a lot of different species. So it could probably go well with things like shrimp, amber tetras, just small fish like that aren't really going to harm it too much and that it can't really harm. As for water conditions, you're going to want a nice heated aquarium and just your standard tropical water conditions, and these guys should thrive in it. But yeah, they are a super awesome looking fish and I would highly recommend them for anybody looking for a 5-gallon option. Moving on to our next fish on the list, we have a pretty common Livebearer in all countries. We have mollies. So for a small aquarium, I would probably recommend something like a balloon molly, just because obviously they have a shortened body, meaning they don't need as much room as the regular mollies. But the reason I put mollies on this list is because they are well known to thrive in smaller environments. As well as this, they are a super easy fish to care for, so they don't need any really crazy requirements when it comes to temperature or water conditions. They are very hardy and don't really mind small fluctuations in each of those factors. So being a Livebearer, they will breed, which is probably the only downside to having them in a 5-gallon aquarium. Just because if you do want to successfully breed them, you may want to put them in a bigger setup. Although they will breed in a smaller setup, it's just you may find that they eat their babies once they give birth. But if you just want them for a nice little fish for your tank, you could definitely go with just a couple of females or just a couple of males, and that would prevent them from breeding at all. So one of the main reasons I chose mollies instead of platies for this list is because platies generally get a little bit bigger. And as well as that, mollies just look nicer in my opinion. You can get a more variety of different colors and shapes, and I think they're a little bit more intriguing than just a platy. These guys can get a little bit aggressive, especially around breeding time, so I wouldn't keep them with anything smaller than probably a neon tetra. Just because for a small fish, they do have a pretty big mouth, so if you are keeping them with stuff like shrimp and smaller fish, they may nip at them a bit and even eat things. As for their diet, they are quite herbivorous, so obviously you can feed them live brine shrimp and frozen foods and stuff like that. Although every now and then I would definitely recommend chucking in something like an algae wafer that they can pick at. And you will find if you do have some algae growing on your rocks and stuff in your tank, these guys will graze on that, and it's actually a pretty good supplement for their diet. But besides that, I think mollies are another great option for any smaller sized aquarium, such as a 5-gallon tank. Moving on to our next fish on this list, we have a little bit more of a specific fish this time. We have Rasbora maculada. So Rasbora maculada or maculada tetras are a very, very small species of Rasbora. So what these guys lack in size, they definitely make up for in looks. They are definitely one of the most stunning little tetras you can get for your aquarium. They are super brightly colored and they move around a lot, so they're very flashy, and yeah, they're just a super unique fish. The only downside to these guys is actually their size. They are very, very small, so they can only be kept with a handful of different species. So things like shrimp and smaller sized tetras are definitely great tank mates for them, although I probably wouldn't go anything above maybe a serpe tetra, just because fish with big mouths nipping at them constantly is definitely not good for them, and it'd probably stress them out a lot as well. With these guys as well, you are going to want to feed them either a really ground up dry food, just because they got very small mouths, or alternatively you can feed them live baby brine shrimp. Obviously live foods are definitely best for small fish like this, just because they can get a lot of nutrients in them and stay as healthy as possible. So being a small fish, they can be quite fickle when it comes to water parameters, so they can't really deal with large fluctuations. Obviously really small fluctuations won't hurt them too much, but yeah, I would definitely just try and maintain a stable water condition with a nice heated aquarium, and they should do perfectly fine. It's also super beneficial if you keep them in a planted aquarium, just because obviously in nature they would be preyed upon quite a bit by larger fish. So having some plants in there just makes them feel a little bit more safe, and it should make them color up a lot nicer as well. So because these guys are so small, you could probably fit anywhere between 7 to 10 in a 5-gallon aquarium quite well, especially if it's planted. But yeah, it's really up to you what you choose. Just obviously don't go too overboard, just because they'll be quite crowded in there and they could start nipping at each other. But I would definitely recommend them if you are looking for a nice, interesting, super bright little fish for your 5-gallon aquarium. So moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another obviously super awesome looking little fish. We have white clouds. So white clouds or white cloud mountain minnows are a very awesome little species of cold water aquarium fish. They don't need any heating in their aquarium unless you get the Vietnamese white clouds, which do like a little bit of a warmer temperature. Although if you are just getting the normal white clouds or the normal gold white clouds, you will find they can do perfectly fine without a heater. So they are a decent sized fish, and I think the only thing you can really compare them to for size is a little bit of a longer version of a neon tetra. So that pretty much just means they can be kept with anything a neon tetra could be kept with. So they are actually quite a stunning fish. They have very nice brown, cream, and red colors all over them. And I think you can also get a yellow variant, which are also very cool. But as well as this, the common golds and just normal white cloud minnows are quite cheap fish, and they're just a really good fish for beginners in general. As well as that, obviously, they do well in really small tanks. So in a 5-gallon or 20-litre tank, you could probably fit 4 to 5 in there quite comfortably. And they are quite a peaceful fish as well, so you shouldn't find they nip at each other too much. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have something that's technically not actually a fish, but it comes in a variety of different colors. We have shrimp. So in particular, I'm talking about Neocaradina shrimp or cherry shrimp, just because these guys are a lot more hardy than Caradina shrimp, and generally they're much more available. So like I said before, these guys come in a variety of different interesting colors, so you can get things like green, red, orange, blacks, just a bunch of really nice colored shrimp. And as well as this, they are obviously a very, very peaceful tank option. So obviously they don't nip at anything in your tank, so you can keep them with pretty much anything that's not going to nip at them or eat them. And if you want to try and grow a nice colony in your aquarium, you're going to want to keep them with things that aren't big enough to eat their shrimplets as well. So some great tank mates I would recommend for these guys are actually the white cloud minnows from before, Enlis, and any other sort of really small Rasbora species. So these guys don't actually really like a heater in their aquarium whatsoever, and if you can keep them at low 20s would probably be the best for these guys. So you can do that by just keeping their tank in an area that gets sunlight a little bit throughout the day. So because these guys are quite small, in a 5-gallon aquarium you could maybe start off with 5 or 10, and if you're keeping them by yourself they will grow rapidly and you'll get a really nice big colony in there. And I'd say you could comfortably fit around 15 to 20 adults in a 20-litre tank, especially if it is a planted tank and all the different shrimp have little areas to go in and hide in. But yeah, shrimp are also another great little option for a 5-gallon or 20-litre tank. Now, moving on to our next fish on our list, we have definitely one of my favorites on this list. We have guppies. So the reason I love guppies so much is, number one, they're easy to breed, they don't need any really large tank spaces, and also obviously they come in a variety of different fin shapes, patterns, and colors. So in a 20-litre tank, you could probably fit maybe 5 guppies in there. I would probably recommend either 2 pairs or a trio, but you could definitely get away with using 2 males and 3 females in a tank, especially if you want to breed them. Otherwise, you could either keep 5 females or 5 males in there. But yeah, guppies are obviously super easy to keep. They don't require any heating whatsoever. They don't need a crazy diet at all. And they can cohabitate with quite a range of different species. So like I said before, they don't need heating in their aquarium. Although if you do want to keep them with other tropical fish, they will do fine with a heater in their aquarium. And I'm sure it would actually be quite beneficial for them. So you wouldn't want to keep anything really below the size of a chili or maculada Rasbora, just because guppies, they aren't very aggressive, but they do like to nip at a lot of things, and a small sized fish like that just wouldn't really deal with that constant nipping very well. Although if you do have fast fish like Danios or neon tetras or even the white cloud minnows, you could definitely put them in with your guppies. Also, you could obviously put in larger sized fish as long as they're not going to bully the guppies as well. The one thing I would recommend with guppies is to keep their really nice, beautiful finnage. You do want to keep quite clean water, just to prevent anything like fin rot and yeah, just sort of diseases like that really diminish the guppies' health and obviously their looks. But yeah, guppies are another great option, and I would highly recommend them for anybody looking for a fish for a 5-gallon aquarium. So moving on to the last fish on this list, I'm sure a lot of people would have been able to guess what this option is. It's probably the most common fish to find in a 5-gallon aquarium. But yeah, for the last spot, we have bettas. So bettas are a great little fish. They're super personable, they're very beautiful, and yeah, they don't really need any large tanks. A 15-litre aquarium is probably the minimum I would go for bettas, although a 5-gallon or 20-litre is the perfect size. So the great thing about bettas is they can actually be kept with tank mates, especially if you do have them in a very heavily planted tank. Now, with that being said, obviously it depends on the betta's personality. So some bettas are very aggressive and they don't want any tank mates in their tank, whereas others are super laid back and peaceful and don't mind having tank mates with them. So if you are getting a Betta, I would highly recommend keeping them with a heater in their aquarium. Although it's not really recommended by a lot of pet stores and stuff like that, I just think it's super beneficial for them to have a heater, and you can really tell it just makes them super nice and healthy. As well as that, some sort of filtration or aeration is quite necessary. Obviously, being a labyrinth fish, which means they can breathe oxygen from the surface of the water, they don't technically actually need aeration in the water. Although I think it's super beneficial, and it'll sort of stop the behavior where they're just laying about the top of the water column. Feeding a high protein food for these guys is really beneficial as well, just because it makes their colors pop, and yeah, it's just really healthy for your fish, and you'll definitely notice a difference. But yeah, bettas are definitely another great option, and I would highly recommend them to anybody. They're obviously super personable and really colorful, and they're just a great option for a smaller size tank. But with that being said, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope I helped you guys find a new fish for your 5-gallon aquarium. If you haven't already, please make sure to go subscribe and leave a comment down below. I love reading through all of them. While you're down there, make sure to go check out some of my other videos. But with that being said, I'll see you all in that next video.